Oh, right. So, Michael Gurian, it's so good to be with you again. We've known each other many years. We're going to talk in depth about a conference that's coming up that you have been organizing and that I'm very excited about. And then we want to talk a little bit more about your background and the work that you've been doing. But I wanted to start just by I pulled out a few of the books that I have on my bookshelf of yours. You in my mind are a Renaissance man, really, truly one of the few that I've ever actually known and encountered. You read about him, but the few times you actually know somebody like that, and you're a prolific writer, you are a poet, you're a counselor, you've done a whole lot. You're a teacher, trainer, many things. And I just want to note a few of the books. I'm just going to hold them up quick. This is Saving Our Sons, A New Path for Raising Healthy and Resilient Boys. Um, uh, this one, you recognize them all, but for
Yep.
those that don't know you on my group, how to help him, practitioner's guide to working with boys and men in therapeutic settings. And I think this may be the most recent, or at least
Yep.
you write so many, it's hard to know what's the most recent, but this is my most recent, Boys, a Rescue Plan, Moving Beyond the Politics of Masculinity to Healthy Male Development. And you did that in conjunction with Sean Coleman, who was president of the Global Initiative for Boys and Men. You, of course, New York Times bestselling author of The Wonder of Boys, and a whole lot more. So that we'll get into that a little bit more. But tell us
Okay.
about the conference, how that came to be, what it is, when it is, few of the highlights of why you're doing it and who's going to be there. Yeah, I've been invited and I'm excited to be one of the speakers, but there's many more of friends and colleagues I've known for years and people are new that I don't know that I'm looking forward to. So please tell us.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I want to thank you, Jed Diamond, because you're such a incredible host and you've done so much. And I mean, you had so many books that I use with my clients and that I've used in my life, really. The Irritable Male. I mean, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I am that. Uh, so so thank you to you. Yeah, so this conference, it's people can access it on helpingboysthrive.org. The easiest way, just go to helpingboysthrive.org. You'll see the What Boys Need as Males conference. The conception of it, yeah, the conception of it, it was it after Boys a Rescue Plan was published, which was January 2025. Right after that, I was in conversation with Paul Golding, who is the president of the Santa Fe Boys Educational Foundation, which is now the Santa Fe Boys Fund, and retired economist and very deep into boys at risk work. And we were in conversation, and we started talking about okay, so there's a lot of interest in boys these days, which is great. And a lot of that interest in boys is still sort of the we got to re-engineer them interest. You know, they're just defective, and males are defective, and we got to re-engineer them. And we were talking about, and as you know, you and I both are very much into evolutionary biology, and then both he and I have had the perspective of we got to figure out what females and males need, right? Because this is nature. This is who we're coming into the world with. So then he and I, this conversation evolved about, well, should we have a conference? Should we put together a conference called What Boys Need as Males, so that people can understand that this stuff is wired here. We're not going to get rid of it. So we need to satisfy it, just like we need to satisfy the needs of females. So that's how it was conceived. And thanks to the Santa Fe Boys Fund and then the Gurian Foundation, which is my foundation with my wife, Gail, who passed away 2 years ago, we have a foundation. And so we decided, okay, that we're going to fund this conference and make this conference happen. And the Gurian Institute, we've been organizing these conferences for like 26 years. So we decided we would take it on. My infrastructure and I would take on the organizing. So that's kind of how it happened. And it's called the What Boys Need as Males Conference. And if folks go to helpingboysthrive.org, you click that, you see
Say it
everybody.
slow so people get it.
Slow down.
Can
Okay.
write it down if they're listening.
Sorry, I do tend to talk fast. Helpingboysthrive.org, helpingboysthrive.org. And that's wherever you'll see the What Boys Need as Males conference, and then you click that, and then you're going to see, my face, Jed's face, Warren Farrell, John Gray, Leonard Sachs, Michael Thompson, Christina Summers, and I'm sorry, I'm not looking right at it. We have 24 speakers. Who am I forgetting? And then all sorts of speakers that people may not know, like Dr. Glenetta Fletcher, who's incredible, Marion Hill, Dr. Daryl Howard, everyone with specialties in areas that fit with what boys need as males. Lisa Britton, who writes for Evie magazine, and who writes this incredible, just incredible work on getting women sensitized to what boys need as males. She's going to speak at it. And then we have a school that's a Gurian model school, Army and Navy Academy. We asked them to bring on 4 Asian males because they're a boys boarding school, so they have a lot of Asian. We wanted to know, like, I wanted to know, what do boys need as males from the Asian perspective? And these are 4 people. It's not the whole Asian perspective, but it's like, let's make this global. And then we have people, John Barry from England. We have Neil Birabaum from South Africa, um, uh, Kenny Marmara de la Cruz, who's Uganda and Britain. So we're trying to get, all sorts of perspectives, all ethnic groups. And then, so some thinkers that people are going to recognize, like perhaps you and me and Warren and John Gray and, the people I mentioned, but also these people who people may not recognize. We've chosen people who are really dynamic, who have a lot to offer and bring us their own perspective on what boys need as males. So that's sort of the conference in a nutshell.
Well, good. So, what are people going to have to pay for all that great talent and
Oh,
interest and so on?
nothing.
Say
So
it again.
yeah, say that again. So it's a free conference. So it takes place January 23rd through 26th. And the people like overseas who pre-record, we're going to deploy their videos, like on the 23rd and then some on the 26th. And then on the 24th and 25th, you're speaking, I'm speaking. So we're going to have live on Zoom on those 2 days. And it's all free. And mainly thanks to the Santa Fe Boys Fund, Paul Golding, Bonnie Erlinger, who are, you see their pictures there. People go there to honor them. So therefore, it's free. So it'll be on YouTube, Zoom via YouTube. So January 23rd through 26th. All this is, of course, on the website. So it's like 24 talks, and it's free.
Yeah. So, this is an opportunity, I think, for all of us that have been doing the work to come together to meet each other, share experiences, and for those that I've already shared it with a number of friends and colleagues who've already signed up. So it's going to be really, really wonderful. And we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the conference at the end of this little talk today. But what you said triggered a couple of thoughts in my mind. My first was you and I go back quite a long ways, and we've known each other for a long time. And uh, some of us, have, in a sense, an origin story of how we got started in this field. And for me, it started, it's an actual date. And as it turns out, it's today, November 21st, 1969. We're actually talking today, November 21st. My son, Jamal, my first son, was born on that day, 1969. And when I held him in my hands shortly after he was born, I made a promise to him that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me, and to do everything I could to create a world where men were fully involved and engaged with their families throughout their lives. And so that's been really the beginning. And shortly, relatively, in years, 2 years later, my first wife and I adopted a little girl as we had talked that we would in college. You know, when you meet, you fall in love, you want to have kids. Yeah, well, well, back in, when we met in 1964 or 5, we said, yeah, we'll have a child and then adopt a child. And we, in fact, did that. Jamal was our first child. Angela, we adopted when she was 2.5 months old. It's an African American little girl. So I have this now, my present wife, Carlin, and I, as you know, we've got 6 children between the two of us and 17 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. But that was really the beginning. And after adopting Angela, it also stimulated my interest to talk about evolutionary biology. I had been in medical school, as you know, before I left and went into social work because medicine at the time was too restrictive. But I've always had a background in biology and understanding the biology of uh, life and and males and females. In one of my books, I wanted to see, well, where did the whole idea of maleness and femaleness, because we know in the animal kingdom they don't have any trouble recognizing that male type deer, antelope, and every other animal are different, and males and females are generally, two different, types of people. And over the years, I looked into the biology and found that from an evolutionary point of view, the sex of animals back into the single-celled animals go back a billion years. So we need to understand better that whole cycle of maleness, femaleness, and all the variations that you've written about and talked about, that people identify in many ways, but biologically, for the most part, we're, as all animals, males and females. So a lot to be explored, a lot to be looked at, but that's kind of my beginning. Can you share anything about what may have gotten you started or an origin story that resonates for you?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking. That's really we all have an origin story, and yeah, I'm younger. I'm 67 now. I was born in 58. By when I was so my parents lived we lived all over the world because my parents were academics who got work and then were foreign service. So, I lived in other cultures and okay, so then I'm coming up through college and this important data because my brain, I'm in college and when I get to college, so I go to college 76 to 80, right? And in that time, anything taught about pretty much anything was about social construction, right? It was so let's take sex, gender. It was, we're biology doesn't really matter, right? We're socially constructed. And so I'm in a sociology class or a psychology class and I'm learning this and I'm thinking already in college, I'm thinking, wait a minute, because I was living all over the world and the play patterns of boys and girls from very young ages were the same. Whether it was a village in India or whether it was New York City, urban, rural, Indian culture, American culture. Okay, so I have this in my head, and then okay, I get through college, and I go to grad school, and I'm meeting up again with this, where it's all about that, and I'm thinking there's just something wrong with that. So I started like you did, I started studying. All right, what is actually out there about neurobiology, about evolutionary biology? What's out there, and I did have an interest in sex gender. So I was really wanting to look at sex and gender. And of course, once you start looking at it, there's a wealth of information on how brain sex matters. So all right, so I'm coming through grad school and I'm working. I've become a counselor, therapist. I'm meeting Gail, my wife. We go overseas, 86 to 88. So I decided to really start testing this out and keep a record of it. So we went to villages out in Diyarbakir, sort of eastern Turkey near Iran, Kurdish villages where they have polygamy, right? I mean, that's a very different culture than like I live in Spokane, Washington. That's where, so, or New York or wherever it is, very different culture. But sure enough, the play patterns are the same, the interactive patterns the same. Does culture matter? It absolutely does. But, what I'm trying to find is male, female. And when I came back in '88, I started teaching at Gonzaga University and again, here in Spokane where I live. And I started to generate a course, and I decided, okay, everyone is teaching that it's all social construction, but I don't think so. And at that point, Reuben Gur and Raquel Gur had started putting out their PET scans from University of Pennsylvania. So now we started having access to PET scans, and there's a wonderful book that came out in 1989 called Brain Sex that captured, and then in 3 videos, they did a documentary, male female brain difference, and it was captured, and you can see PET scans and all that. So that's when I started going, okay, we can talk about male female. I can help people to understand it. So simultaneously, Robert Bly, which is where I think you and I met. I think we met at a Mendocino or other men's conference. Is that where we met?
It could have been. I was trying to remember it. I can't remember exactly, but I met and known Robert Bly for years, gone to some of the early conferences, and that sounds right if that's how you recall it.
I think maybe that's where we met.
Right.
Yeah. So then Bly brings the Jungian. He brought, excuse me, he's passed away, but he brought the Jungian and Michael Mead and everyone, they were bringing the Jungian. And that was already an area that I had studied and that I used in my practice. And so then here comes the Jungian, and then we've got all the neurobiology. And that's kind of my origin story, where I
Yeah.
then started trying to figure out how to put those together. And so I wrote some poetry, like you said, some books of poetry. I write poetry novels, etc. But in the nonfiction category, the psychology category, I wrote The Prince and the King. And The Prince and the King was my first trade book, and that came out in '91. And that one put together, from male Prince and the King, father son relationship, put together the Jungian with hey, this is male, fathering is male, right? Being a son is male too. We got to look at that. And
Right.
so I think that's kind of how it happened for me. It wasn't a date, but it was this coming together of these different influences, and then always knowing there's something wrong with the pure social construction perspective. It's just too limited, and it ends up, and that's all the work. It ends up actually robbing females and males of what they need to survive and thrive. And so, like my books on girls, I've written a number of books on girls and women too. It's from that perspective. Here's what females need, and then we'll branch out to nurture, and then we'll branch out to culture. But let's first figure out who these people are by nature, because that's their genetic package, right? That's their evolutionary package. That's what we come in as, is male and female. And by the way, trans fits in that. Gender dysphoria fits in that. No one is left out by looking at male and female. Um, we just know there's a spectrum, right? We know there's a spectrum. There's not one male, one female. So there's a spectrum of male, there's a spectrum of female. So no one's left out. But the core is, like you said, this billion years of evolutionary biology.
Yeah, that's fascinating, how we've interwoven and when we met and our backgrounds, interesting how they've intersected. And another piece of what I have discovered, because being a little older than you, I kind of grew up earlier in the time when the feminists were really strongly, in a sense, looking for their own identity, and women were meeting in groups to find out who they were as women. And I think what was the concern back then, and I think still to some degree, is that there has been some in the area of both genetics, biology, evolution that have at least some tended to look at uh, the differences as either hardwired, or the early genetic studies Well, once you know the genome and what how the the nucleotides line up, then that will tell you a lot about who you are and that they don't change. They're locked in. So that was one of the fears. We're going to lock people into something that's unchangeable. And the other, of course, which is still going on, is that in some quarters, we lock people in and then decide, well, if women are this way, there's certain things often that they must do, like be homemakers and take care of babies. That's a must for those that lock people in. Or there are things that they can't do. They can't be intellectual or they can't, go to medical school. For instance, when I was in medical school back in 1965 is when I graduated from college and went to medical school. Almost all the medical students were male, and there were only a few women. And some of it was background interest, but some of it was the view and, the growing up that said women are not capable of doing those kind of things. I'm a runner, and one of the earliest races that I ran, it's a race called the Dipsea. It's been running in Marin County, and you go up over Mount Tamalpais, and it's the oldest, road race. I think next to the Boston Marathon goes back to 1906 or something like that. And for most of the time, even up until not too long before I raced, they didn't allow women in the race because women were viewed as too, sensitive and their systems were not up to running that far. So the first women that ran in the Dipsea were women that dressed up to look like men so they could get in. So the truth is about evolutionary psychology and modern evolutionary science and the science that we write about, talk about, and explore lets us know one that not only are genes not your destiny, but they don't lock you in. That the interaction between the genetics and the environment means that we adapt and change all the time, and that there are switches that turn on the genes or turn certain ones off that allow the change that we know needs to happen in human life. So I think there's a whole lot of modern science now that people need to know. And I think part of the conference that you're going to be, involved with and that I will be opening up some of the reality that you've been working on for years. I have to a wider audience and bringing in a wider group of practitioners and exploration because the truth is, at the core, most of us want better lives for our children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. And that it's clear to me and many that if we continue doing what we do in the world and are as cut off from nature, cut off from ourselves, not living from our full potential, that humans are really in danger, not only of wrecking the planet, but wrecking our whole support system. So I think this conference is not just well, it's going to look at men and women and interaction in new ways, but I think it has the potential for looking at a whole different way of being on the planet that I think is really desperately needed. So I don't know, your thoughts on
Yeah,
kind of where these things might go?
yeah, beautifully put, Jed. I think, I mean, a few things. One is that back then, I totally get it. I mean, I'm kind of 76 to 80. I'm in college, so it's and then grad school, in the 80s. It's like, okay, I get, I totally get why then it's based on what you just said, where we went to the other end of social construction, like right for centuries it was one end of social construction which you've described, which is okay, this is what males and females are, so we will socially construct them to just do that, right? Male female role, all of that. Okay, so then the pendulum swung way over in the eras you're describing, 60s, 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. It swung way over to the other end, which is all right, nope, we're going to socially construct males and females to be this other stuff, which is going to be that males are going to be we're not going to talk about males anymore. Actually, we're going to just re-engineer them or whatever we need. They'll cry a lot, they'll talk about their feelings a lot, they'll be better husbands, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to construct them that way. And females will be, we're going to we were allowed to talk about females, but we're still going to say to females, this is who you have to become, right? And now, hopefully, we are past all that. Hopefully, now we can talk about nature, nurture, and culture. So, like you said, we can talk about how you have a biological organism, and we got to understand that biological organism. And I would argue with males, if we don't understand it and nurture it, they will turn on us. And that is what we're seeing. You don't take care of your males, they're going to turn on themselves, they'll kill themselves, and they're going to kill us. To be simplistic, by kill, they might not kill us, but they're going to become so lonely and depressed that they're going to be doing things that are bad for society, and etc. So I think now we should be able to talk about having a biological organism and saying, okay, you can't have a biological organism without an environment. So the environment really matters and the biological organism matters. They both matter. And I, of course, use three terms: nature, nurture, and culture, because nurture is the close on parenting, raising, mentoring, etc. of our children. Culture is an overlay that has influence, but it's an overlay. And so I talk about nature, nurture, and culture. It's all biology plus environment. And what I have begged people to do, as you know, is to talk about the biology first, but not only. Just talk about it first,
Right.
so that you figure out who this person is. And we already can see how males and females are wired, to use that language, from very early, right? I mean, we all have the research of looking at 6 month olds, looking at 1 year olds, looking at 2 year olds. So it's just like, let's use it. And the ultimate goal of of my work is I want to give everyone these tools, and I think this is the goal of everyone at our conference. We want to give everyone this knowledge and these tools so that they can do their part to raise and educate. In this case, it's a male development conference, so to raise and educate young males so that those guys will flourish. And if they flourish, the society's going to flourish. It really will, because societies are built and destroyed on the backs of males. And that doesn't downplay female development. It's equal and it's complementary, right? It's equal and it's complementary. And the male part of it, if we don't take care of that part of the equation, we're in real danger. So I do think a lot's at stake, even though it's this vision of let's look at biology first, let's say. But I think a lot's at stake. And I do feel like the last 30 to 40 years are proving to us as a culture that if we don't take care of males, they turn on themselves and they turn on us. I mean,
Right.
I just hope it's obvious to people, whether it's gang violence, all the way across, whether you want to go low socioeconomic and look at how dangerous those streets are, what poverty does to the brain, and how it is an adverse childhood experience. And if you want to look at violence, you look at sexual abuse, you know, uh, just look at the trauma, look at lack of fathering, look at each trauma and its effect on male development, and then look at these guys and what trauma has done to their brains, and then the trauma they create.
Exactly.
And some of the trauma is lack of attachment, lack of father. These things are trauma, and they affect the male brain specifically, and they affect the male brain somewhat differently than the female brain. So that's why, to me, if we're talking about boys and men, and people will say, I hear people say, no, it's boring to talk about the male brain or male biology, or we shouldn't talk about it. It'll hurt people or something. And I just go, no, we have to talk about the male brain because it begins and ends in this brain. This brain is
Exactly.
what's being affected, as well as female brain. It's what's being affected by nature, nurture, and culture.
Indeed, and so well said. And I want to just kind of, as we're kind of wrapping up and finishing up for today, I want to note, since you and I are two guys, obviously been talking. The conference is going to focus on boys and men, but it isn't just a male journey. and it isn't just a male perspective. That one of the things I learned in both, you know, my trip from medical school, interestingly, when I left medical school, went into social work. In medical school, it was very male oriented. There were mostly male students and a few females. I went into social work at UC Berkeley, and it was the opposite. So when I joined social work, it was almost all females at the time, and males there were only few of us. So I've been kind of marinated both in the the left brain, right brain, the male, female, the fact that I had a son early on and then a daughter, and and I've had family experience, and the evolutionary, the some of the main people in evolutionary science and biology are women. It isn't just guys talking about what guys need. And I think people will recognize we're talking today to guys, but the conference, and when people go and see who are the speakers and who some of the luminaries are in the field, it clearly is a recognition that we really are all in this together, and males and females are coming together and really looking at some things that have been known for quite some time. The science has been out there. You and I've spoken
Oh
on
yeah.
it. A lot of other people have written and spoken. But now there is a new urgency, and both because clearly boys and men are falling behind in many areas, and we're hearing more about that, but also the effect on the society at large is becoming very obvious from the way that authoritarian leaders all over the world are put into power by often wounded, cut off males, and how that spreads and the danger to the society and the environment. So the conference is, I think, exciting. I'm going to leave with you kind of giving a wrap up about the conference, saying again how people can connect and get signed up, and any kind of last words that you'd like to share with the audience about the work that you're doing and where things you see going. But start with the conference.
Okay, yes. So it's helping. It's called the What Boys Need as Males Conference. It's on Zoom, January 23 through 26. It's the live dates are 24, 25, and the pre-recorded, especially from speakers overseas, 23rd and 26th. Um, you go to helpingboysthrive.org, and click that What Boys Need Conference. You see it right there. And then that leads to all the speakers and all the information. And then there's a sign up, and you just click it and you put your name, your email address, you signed up. It's free. But if you don't sign up, then you're not going to be able to participate, right? Because it's by having people's email addresses that we communicate with them and get them into the conference. So just give the name and the email address there. What Boys Need as Males Conference on helpingboysthrive.org, and then people will get welcome letter and they'll get all the logistics. So that's the place to go. And in terms of closing thoughts, well, first of all, thank you, Jed, for having me on and for all of your work. And thank you for speaking at the conference. Jed will be speaking live, and you'll get to interact with Jed, folks, and also with me. You get to interact with us, Q&A. So thank you. And also, to all people out there who are interested in combining nature, nurture, and culture, combining nature, nurture, and culture. This is a great conference for you, because it really we have people who are going to bring it all together, so we can really see what males need, and we can see how we can nurture their nature. And I think people are going to, well, and because when you nurture the nature of an organism, so that's like, I wrote a book called Nurture the Nature, so it's a phrase I use. When we nurture the actual nature of the organism, that organism is more able to reach its potential, because we're nurturing who that person is. And so nurture the nature, I think, is really important. So nurture is important and nature is important. And then, of course, we're doing that in the context of a culture. So that's the perspective of this conference. And I believe that actually people are ready for this, that it will make sense to people, that it won't be bad to talk about the male brain. Um, because we're not going to only talk about the male brain. Obviously, we're going to talk about nurture. How do we nurture this brain to bring out its best potential? And I speak on this all the time, and wherever I go, women and girls say, "Oh my gosh, I learned so much," you know, about not only the guys but about myself, because we're going to be comparing male female. And so I think sign up also, folks, if you're curious to learn more about female too, right? It's not, yeah, we're talking about male, but we're also complementary in life, that we're going to understand each other and uplift each other. Um, so I guess that would be my closing thought. Does that
Okay,
make sense?
well, yeah, we all and we all came from a sperm and an egg for the most part, and so females and males are everywhere in our lives, and our mothers, our fathers, our our daughters and sons and grandkids. So all of this, I think, is a very unique conference, and I'm really looking forward to being part of it and to letting people know as soon as we can about it. And for now, we'll say goodbye. Let me just wrap up. Michael, I want to stay on the line with you for a minute, but say goodbye to our audience for now, and we'll hopefully meet you at the conference.